far as what was your mood? What were some of the things you were looking at having to deal with as far as legislation and stuff?
Well, I knew there was some difference between where the House of Deputies and the House of Bishops were, and so the question in my mind is how much the House of Bishops would be able to moderate or soften the aggression of the House of Deputies towards the whole onward thrust of the agenda of this gospel of inclusivity.
Mm-hmm. Now, this has been, for the last 40 years, for part of the Episcopal Church, if not longer. None of this has really surprised you that it's on the agenda or that it's really, been...
No, none of it's surprising, but it's hard to convey, if you're not here, how tedious and wearisome it is to have things, the same things come at you from different angles, whether it comes from the World Mission Committee or the Social and Urban Affairs Committee or canons or ministry. You have these agenda items coming at you from various committees and resolutions, and so you're always have to be keenly alert as to what's coming down the pipeline.
Now, you actually traveled here with a delegation, people who attend the House of Deputies as well. What was their mood before they got here? Did they have any idea what they were going to be up against?
Let's see, I believe of our clergy deputation, only John Burwell had been here to previous general conventions. The other deputies were novices, kind of eager and intrigued and apprehensive perhaps at the same time. I believe the lay deputation, only 2 had been here before, so it was a fresh approach towards General Convention from the deputation from South Carolina.
Now, throughout the week, what was your mood like as these things were coming towards you? Let's be honest, this is not just a human experience, this is about spiritual things that are demonic. What was your mood about all this?
Oh my, I'll tell you what, Kevin, I woke up 2 a.m. on morning before last, and I began asking I had to ask myself, why are we losing this this whole issue of human sexuality, both as a culture and as a church? And when I awoke at 2 a.m. that night, I began to think, we are approaching this whole thing of gay, lesbian, bisexual, transgender issues as if it's in a vacuum rather than in the whole context of human sexuality. And I think until we as the church begin to deal with our own sexual compromises, we will always come across somewhat hypocritical to the world and those who press this agenda. When we recognize that the divorce level among evangelical and godly Christians is at the same level almost as the rest of the world, when we recognize the pervasiveness of many within the church who tinker with this or that in terms of sexual compromise, the things they allow themselves to engage with in terms of computers or televisions, we, I think, are in need of a profound repentance. That we cannot keep putting forward this standard towards gay and lesbian people and allow ourselves to live in such profound compromise ourselves. And so there is a spiritual thing at work here that I don't think we plumb the depth of, and it's time we pause and look at that.
Sure. I mean, we are...
I don't know if that's clear on that as I'm saying it,
yeah.
But it's part of the spiritual questions that we need to begin to ask ourselves.
Sure. I mean, you stood up at the House of Bishops and you kind of gave a sexuality 101 class. Okay.
Yes, I wish I had more time to have done it, because I don't know if many people have thought about the whole matter very much. You know, we do a lot of feeling about sex, but we do very little thinking about it. We froth about it, we foam about it, we meditate upon it, but rarely do we sit back in dispassion and say, what is the purpose for which God has made us a sexual being? And then begin to answer that question philosophically and from this biblically. And sometimes we take a few verses out of the Bible and put those forward and forget that from the book of Genesis, when it says that God has made us male and female created he them, the man shall leave his father and mother and be joined to his wife, and the two become one, all the way to the book of Revelation, when the whole thing concludes with the marriage of Christ and his church, Christ and the bride. And so we're not just talking about 7 passages of the Bible, we're talking about the profound thrust of all of human history, which is begun with male and female, Adam and Eve, if you want to use those terms, and concludes with Jesus and the bride, the marriage supper of the Lamb.
Sure.
So these are profound things we're dealing with, and we need to put it in that context.
Now, your mood now, after this is all over, you have to go home and talk to parishes. And one of the jobs of a bishop is to visit parishes.
Yes.
They're going to have some questions. They're going to have some opinions. What is your message to them after this General Convention?
Well, the first thing I need to do, of course, is meet with the clergy of the Diocese of South Carolina. We'll be doing that, I believe it's August 13th. It's a Thursday morning. And it seems to me on the far side of General Convention 2009, the Diocese of South Carolina, it is imperative that we find a place to stand, and not just a place to stand, but a place to thrive that is relational and structural. And so we will find that place to stand and that place to thrive. And so things have already started in the works in that, but I don't want to go too much into the details of that till I've had a chance to talk to the clergy of the Diocese of South Carolina.
What is your mood now that you're leaving here? I mean, you
know, it's quixotic. Sometimes it's rather somber and like waking up after a family party that went too far and began to reveal deeper levels of dysfunction, and you find bottles strewn all over the tables and food on the floor, and you begin to ask yourself, all right, how do I assess this whole thing? Other times it's one of profound resolve that we will find a way forward in the midst of all of this, and that God will strengthen us for the challenges at hand, and almost eager for the opportunity that lies ahead of us.
I'd like to talk about a little document that was put together called, basically for all intents and purposes, the Minority Report.
The Anaheim Statement.
The Anaheim Statement, the 26 bishops, and that may be why it was what I would consider a pretty weak statement, but 26 bishops put their signature on the statement, resolving to resolve that they resolve something. What do you think of, what's your opinion, not of the Minority Report, but of the expression of Orthodox bishops at this convention?
Well, I'm not sure I heard you there with that thing in the background.
Yeah, but we have a lot of ambiance here.
We may have chosen a not real good place. It seems to be suddenly, once was quiet, now it's a profound passageway. Every
time I push the record button, it's a cesspool of activity, yes.
What was the question there, Kevin?
The question again is, the Orthodox bishops, and there are a plethora here.
Yeah.
Anywhere between, I would count between 8 and 20 at any one time.
I think there was a sense among the bishops who crafted the statement when we originally got together of needing to make a statement that would reflect at least what all of those 12 or 14, however many we were, needed to say and could as a group say. We're all in different contexts, and so what one bishop feels compelled to say and what another bishop is compelled to say. Some want to say things stronger because that's how they feel. I'm usually in that camp, and some have strong reservations about certain things, but would say it in a more reconciling way. And so it's always a willingness to say, how can we say this so that we can have a breadth of expression of those who have voted against DO25 or CO56 or whatever the bingo game might be for that occasion.
Sure.
You see. And so it was a statement which we were hopeful that others would sign on to. Now, as it's turned out, some who voted yes on both of those resolutions wound up signing it. Perhaps they are personally committed to abiding by the Windsor process or the Anglican Covenant and BO 33, but felt like they wanted to give others the space to do what they needed to do within the House of Bishops, and one can never know for sure why one does what one does,
Sure.
unless you ask them.
Well, it's been my contention and the contention in the press room that they had more votes to do more that they could have done than that they did.
Well, you know, that's kind of one of the untold stories of things, actually. You know, it's kind of like this. You have a team that on the football field dominates every side of the ball. And on the offense, they gain 600 yards running and passing. They're moving the ball up and down the field. And then defensively, they limit the other team to 35, 40 yards, maybe two first downs. But they fumble the ball at one point, and the team that is just getting trounced badly actually scores a field goal, and the other team having gained 600 yards, at the end of the day, when push comes to shove, they can push it in for a touchdown, and they almost settle for a tie.
Wow.
It's you know, I suppose maybe they stood at the precipice and lost nerve and backed away because there is unrest in the church.
Sure. I'm under the opinion that D025 was in effect a repealing of B033. The entire press was, everybody I talked to in the House of Bishops and the House of Deputies thought the same thing. However, Bonnie Anderson and Presiding Bishop Jeffrey Shorey have tried to make it clear to the rest of the communion that that's not what D025 was about. What is your understanding of D025 and its effect on B033?
Actually, Kevin, I'd like to put that in a larger context and then answer the question.
Well, of course you can.
In 2003, General Convention, all the debate was referencing Lambeth 110. In 2006, the debate and the refrain often was, we need to remember the Windsor process. The Windsor process, you know, was a softening of Lambeth 110. And now in 2009, you hear little about Windsor, and the whole question was, well, wait a minute, we don't want to go contrary to BO 33. So at each convention, you see, we're responding to a weaker resolve, a weaker position. And then somehow or another, we can say, oh, well, we still believe that BO 33 is in place. Never forgetting that BO 33 was not received by all the primates of the communion as a sufficient response to the Windsor process. And that the Windsor process was, for many, a weakening of Lambeth 110. So let's put this in the context of what we're really talking about. These are communion-breaking issues, and to soft pedal it, as if we're somehow or another holding to BO 33, when in fact we've walked away from Lambeth 110 years ago.
You raised an important phrase there, walking away. The Windsor Report actually uses a phrase called walking apart in paragraph 154.
Right.
A point when the Anglican Communion and TEC can no longer reconcile. Has this General Convention really opened the door for walking apart?
Well, I believe it has, but it's not for us alone in North America to say that such has taken place. We have the instruments of unity that one by one need to respond one way or another. The difficulty, of course, is Lambeth has been, that's a good 9 years off before that could respond to what we have done. The ACC, that's a toss of the coin. I suppose what many people are waiting for is the Archbishop of Canterbury to weigh in. Waiting, waiting, waiting.
The whole communion is structured probably in an incomplete way. To be an Anglican, you are in communion with the Archbishop of Canterbury. Has that really worked, that being a pure structure for an Anglican church?
You know, in my view, the Anglican communion has been trying to catch up with its success for a long time. We are in many ways the victim of our own success in terms of spreading the Anglican understanding of Christianity around the world. And as we've spread that around the world, we've been slow to put in place structures that sufficiently govern the spread of Anglicanism. And that is really shown in the 20th century when Lambeth, which was itself in 1858, was an attempt to catch up with the global spread of Anglicanism. The ACC in the mid-20th century was another attempt to catch up with the spread of Anglicanism. The primates in 1978, Lambeth being put forward as one way to help govern the spreading of the communion. With the spread of internet and intercontinental travel, we suddenly find ourselves playing catch-up with the flat world, if you will. And as we're playing catch-up, there's those who want to hold on to old methodologies of governance that just are not sufficient for the 21st century. So my contention has been what we're in the midst of right now is, you know, what is at stake is not just Anglicanism in North America, it's Anglicanism throughout the world.
Can you give me your perspective of the ever-changing landscape of the Anglican Communion?
You know, Kevin, one of the fascinating things I find as I surf the blogs and follow how people respond to various statements that others make, this whole issue of inside strategy, outside strategy, and the inside strategy within tech is dead, and why even bother to stay, and the problem is in all of that is those are terms that other people have put on the issue, not necessarily the way that I would frame it. But if I just use those terms, inside strategy, I have not been, and we in South Carolina do not see ourselves as somehow or another reforming the Episcopal Church. The landscape of the Anglicanism is shifting all the time, and this General Convention will shift it once again. And what is at issue now is the survival of the communion, and the spreading of the gospel of Jesus Christ to transform people's lives rather than the gospel of inclusivity that is also aggressively being spread. And so as I look at our role in the Diocese of South Carolina, we are to work for the shaping of Anglicanism in the 21st century. And we need to find and remain and stay in that place that will give us the most leverage in doing that. And because that's what's at stake here.
Landscapes, you know, there's internal, external, there's in and out, and there's a global landscape of Anglicanism and there's a domestic landscape of Anglicanism. Give me your perspective on all the push and pull that goes on from day to day as a bishop.
Well, the domestic landscape, there are two movements, so to speak, two entities.
You have TEC and the Anglican Church in Canada, which from my perspective is promulgating the gospel of inclusivity that would displace the gospel of Jesus Christ and what we know of as the core doctrine of the Christian faith. And so that is exporting throughout Anglicanism, or threatens to, would desire to spread this un-Catholic teaching about Jesus Christ and the church. Then you have in ACNA a confederation of people that, just speaking for myself, I do not yet see a fullness of Catholic ecclesiology there. There seem to be some groups that are so wedded to their personal identity, even though their identity may have only been around 5 years, 10 years. In those 5 years, in that decade, they have so wedded themselves to their understanding of who they are in the church that there's a hesitancy to surrender that. And so what we have almost is a codified, hate to use the word, a codified schism that, look, a prenuptial agreements, I'll enter into this, but I'm not going to surrender myself fully to one another. Thomas Brown, centuries ago, said, those who schism with others do lightly bond among themselves. And so what we have to get over, if those in ACNA have to get over that unwillingness for mutual accountability, surrender, responsibility.
It's a very important point. There is no perfect church. And ACNA certainly isn't at this, and they'll use the word, well, where formation is chaos. That's great for your first sentence, but after that, you need to be productive, and
yes.
you know.
Well, here's the thing, Kevin. There's no place to go to get out of what we are encountering in North America. You see, you can say, look, I am tired of these cultural wars. I'm tired of dealing with the GLBT stuff. I'm tired of this gospel of inclusivity. I'm going to find a church where I don't have to deal with these things. But you see, it's the culture that's bringing it. And it may not be in your neighborhood yet, but I guarantee you, all of this is coming to a neighborhood near you. And so those of us who have been fighting the battle in the Episcopal Church are actually in the front lines of this whole thing. And we need to quit firing at one another and say, look, we're in a common battle here, and each needs to find the place that they can leverage for the gospel of Jesus Christ and the one holy Catholic and Apostolic Church.
That kind of does leave you in a sticky situation, because ACNA's goal eventually is to have North America as a growing body of churches. Yet you are an Orthodox diocese of South Carolina. You certainly don't need ACNA to help you guys in any way by planting churches. It's a strange paradox you find yourself in as a bishop and as an Orthodox diocese.
Yes, and that landscape will change almost monthly. And so, and if you're not keeping up with the changing landscape, you may be back 2 or 3 years asking the questions of 2 or 3 years ago. And we have a whole new set of questions to ask right now on the far side of General Convention 2009.
Sure.
And so when I go back to the Diocese of South Carolina, I'll meet with the clergy, the standing committee, the deans, and we'll say, okay, looking at the landscape now, what is South Carolina called to do? And what we're called to do is to find a place to stand and to thrive that is both relational and structural, and we shall do that.
Finishing type question here. You are, in a way, a victim of B033. You had to be elected twice to be the Bishop of South Carolina.
Irony of ironies.
Yes. You know, reflect a little bit on that time in your life when the actions of the House of Bishops and the interpretation of that action really affected your state as a bishop.
Well, it was really, of course, the standing committees that were the most reluctant to grant, you know, all the sacraments for all the baptized is the refrain we've heard over and over here, of course, but I guess they forgot that I'd been baptized. I don't know, but you know, it actually turned out for my good. All things work together for good for those who love Christ and God and are called according to His purposes. And I have to say the whole thing's been a blessing to me, and you know, I don't regret going through it at all.
Part of the AnglicanTV ministry has been chasing around the world, following politics. And we see of that new things forming, old things dying and stuff like that. But in the end, there's a bigger message here that you can't just leave in anger and do something and try to do something new. What can you give me a little perspective on that in a New Testament way?
Well, you know, the other day I was at a House of Bishops meeting. We had a break, and I went out to do some meditation, and I brought my journal with me. And I was sitting on a bench just journaling about all the sounds and things around me. It's the way I use to kind of quiet my heart. And I heard the wind blowing. In Canoga, there are 3 big flagpoles. One has the U.S. flag, one has the state flag, and one has the Episcopal Church flag. And the wind was blowing the flag ropes against the flagpole. And it caught my attention. I looked up and I saw the Episcopal Church flag. And I felt anger. And as I felt that anger, I thought, oh my, the anger of man cannot work the righteousness of God, the Scripture says. You cannot, enter into this spiritual struggle with anger and unforgiveness in your heart. You will become the mirror image of that which you do not like, that which you resent. And so whatever you do and whatever you create begins to reflect that which you have not forgiven and that which you have held in anger. And so those of us in the Episcopal Church, those of us who have left the Episcopal Church, we need to deal with that anger issue. We need to deal with the forgiveness issue, because otherwise we will create, those who have left, a mirror image of that which they have left. And those of us within, well, we cannot do the work God has called us to do. Doesn't mean that we surrender the challenge, our convictions, doesn't mean we compromise on the faith once delivered to the saints, but it does mean we hold that faith always. Asking ourselves, can I do this work in the spirit of godliness and the joy of the Lord, which is our strength?